Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another video. So before we talk about the Ahsoka series, we've got a couple of updates for the Andor show. We've not spoken about it too much since the show's first season ended, but just like so many other fans, I really do miss it. And throughout the run of the first 12 episodes, we often discussed how viewership was pretty low, but that eventually would age well and folks would get on board. Well, that has already started happening, because according to Nielsen, viewership for the finale has increased to a tremendous degree, with 674 million minutes of watch time compared to 455 for episode 11. For perspective, this is around 14 million people. Now, it's not the viewership of Kenobi or the Book of Boba Fett, who had around 20 million viewers for the last episode, but it's a huge improvement, and as Andor brews on the Disney Plus platform, this should increase over time. People are slowly discovering Andor. Unfortunately, the series never made it to the top 10, but the increase in viewership is fantastic news for the second season, because it means fans are catching up on the back end. Not to mention that new subscribers to Disney Plus, who are gonna come for the Mandalorian and Ahsoka, will probably also check out Andor if it's recommended to them, and word of mouth on the series has been pretty expansive. So I think this is great news for the show and its future. We still have 2 years until the second season, so by then a lot more fans will be anticipating it. The show deserves good numbers in the long run. In my opinion, as you guys know, it was the best written of the Disney Plus Star Wars shows, and those looking for a more mature side to the franchise will be satiated if they give it a go. So I really can't wait for season 2, and I really do miss doing episode breakdowns, but we have the Bad Batch, Ahsoka, the Mandalorian, Skeleton Crew, so much Star Wars content in 2023. And just before we move on guys, what was your favourite Star Wars show of 2022? And on top of this, what was your favourite moment or scene? Let me know in the comments down below. And so now guys, the Ahsoka series. Making Star Wars have been revealing a lot of things for the Ahsoka series and Skeleton Crew, and now we have more. They've added a couple of tidbits. They've now heard of a character who's codenamed Babylon, and they think this is Ray Stevenson's character. They say he's going to be playing a villain loyal to Thrawn, and he's got a droid assassin by his side. Ray Stevenson's Babylon has a lot of screen time. Making Star Wars then reiterates that Lars Mikkelsen looks really tall and imposing as Thrawn. Unrelated to Babylon's assassin, there is another cyborg droid character called Karnast, who serves Thrawn and Babylon. He says Karnast is more like a dark trooper than a full-on droid, but is a cyborg nonetheless. So those are the latest updates. Super exciting stuff. And now guys, I want to stay on the subject of Ahsoka and speculate a little bit about where the show's going. So I've been thinking about the recent information concerning Ahsoka and the World Between Worlds, the alternate ending to Revenge of the Sith. In case you missed it, some leaks by Making Star Wars reveal that Ahsoka's going to revisit the World Between Worlds. She looks into various portals of the Star Wars timeline, which contain alternate realities and paths she could have taken, and one of these is going to be a reimagined version of Battle of the Heroes, but instead of Anakin versus Obi-Wan, it's going to be Anakin versus Ahsoka. In this version of events, Ahsoka never left the Jedi Order. The rest of the events play out in the same way, apart from one very important difference. Ahsoka never left, and she follows her master Anakin to Mustafar instead of Obi-Wan. I imagine this version is going to be super emotional. But more than anything, this version of events would have had a much greater success than what did end up happening in episode 3. Notably, one of Obi-Wan's biggest regrets is not talking Anakin out of turning to the dark side. He tried, but he could have done better. Anakin felt as though the Jedi Order let him down and the Republic failed him. From his mother dying and being told to ignore his feelings, ignore attachments, and not being there for him the way Qui-Gon would have been if he survived. So, in the alternate reality when Ahsoka goes there, I think she would have been successful. Obi-Wan may have been nicknamed the Negotiator, but Ahsoka would have pulled on his heartstrings and would have played into the emotions that would have brought Anakin back to the light side. Now this also goes back to a deleted scene from the Clone Wars. On a mission to Utapau, Anakin expresses his frustration to Obi-Wan about Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order, and it affected him so terribly. I think that was such a monumental moment. Anakin saw Ahsoka's point, and those feelings of betrayal towards the Jedi started mounting in Anakin, and who knows, maybe they'll include that scene in a flashback. But the point is, if Ahsoka went to Mustafar, she would have had much more success in talking him through everything, and that's going to be so amazing to see on screen. It's such a fanfiction moment, but it's a what if that is very much a Clone Wars fan's biggest dream. Making Star Wars hinted that this scene would end without Anakin losing any limbs, even though the two of them do fight in a similar way to Obi-Wan and Anakin in Revenge of the Sith. And I wonder if they're going to use some ideas from a deleted sequence to show an alternative version of events. The Battle of the Heroes was intense and insane, and it finished with Obi-Wan gaining the high ground, but that wasn't always the case. The original idea for that scene scene was very different. There was a different sort of combat and a different outcome. Of course, Anakin does lose his limbs in the end, but it was still quite different. And instead of giving us the same scene with Ahsoka instead of Obi-Wan, they might try to reinvent the scene altogether, with Anakin and Ahsoka having a noticeably different fight on Mustafar. And I'm very curious to see how the planet's gonna look using the volume. They're probably gonna use Savannah Stain, or whoever the mystery actress cast to play a younger Ahsoka is. And so with that said, guys, we're now gonna do a reaction to that deleted sequence from Revenge of the Sith, which is unrendered and unused, and we're gonna see if we can imagine Ahsoka in Obi-Wan's position, because if we're getting an alternate Mustafar scene, Ahsoka would no doubt use her two blades. So I think this footage could be something that Dave Filoni refers to. Let's dive into this. So reacting to this scene could act as a double whammy, because for one thing we get to see how Ahsoka might fit in, but also since we're getting an alternative version of this scene in the Ahsoka show, we can see George Lucas's alternate cut. Let's dive straight into this. And you know, very similar to Revenge of the Sith, we could have a lot of build up to the actual fight. They could do this fight within the confines of Mustafar before going out to the lava. And here's the other thing, we don't know how long the sequence is going to be in the Ahsoka series. Is it going to be, you know, as long as the actual one we see in episode 3, or are they just investing a small amount of time to give us that flashback? And could it be one of many, maybe even another fanfiction idea that Ahsoka was at the birth of the twins? That'd be really cool. That is terrifying. It kind of looks like a PS1 game, but then again, all of this is unrendered and from, you know, in the build-up to Revenge of the Sith, so between 2003 and 2005. So I'm just going to jump forward a bit so we get some actual action in the lava itself. So we could see Ahsoka and Anakin kind of have a fight here on this platform, just like Anakin and Obi-Wan did in the film, and that could then lead on to what comes next. And you know what's really interesting about this scene in the actual movie is that most of the dialogue happens at the start and at the end of the fight. Obi-Wan comes storming out of Padme's ship and he's all about, you know, Anakin, my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. Anakin talks about his new empire, and there's not much in terms of Obi-Wan trying to convince Anakin to turn away from this path. And then at the end of the fight he says Palpatine is evil, and then the whole emotional scene where Obi-Wan says you are my brother and all of that kind of thing. But I imagine if Anakin and Ahsoka are going to be fighting, there's going to be a lot of dialogue in between, probably when they're on this platform, and similarly when they're actually over the lava. So that's going to be fascinating too. Ahsoka might say this is not the path Anakin, think of Padme. You know, in this version of events, Ahsoka would be well aware of the fact that Padme was pregnant with Anakin's kids, and I feel as though Anakin would have a much better relationship with Ahsoka in that moment compared to what he had with Obi-Wan, because in his mind, Obi-Wan was part of that suffering. Think back to the Kenobi series a few years later. Obi-Wan says, "I'm sorry Anakin for all of it," because in that moment, Obi-Wan realized the Jedi were kind of culpable for a bit of this, not listening to Anakin, not being there for him emotionally, and Obi-Wan wasn't the figure Qui-Gon would have been. Qui-Gon would have been able to be there for Anakin and tell him that what he's feeling is human and natural, instead of telling him suppress it, hide away your feelings, attachments lead to fear and the dark side. He would have had none of that. And there are quite a lot of similarities between Ahsoka and Qui-Gon Jinn. Even though she never knew him, she listened to the will of the Force instead of just blindly following the council. So I believe Ahsoka would have been able to convince him. And knowing that the making Star Wars leaks say that Anakin doesn't get injured in this fight, it's going to be interesting if he still becomes Darth Vader, and what that's going to look like with his limbs. He wouldn't need a suit in the end, but I suspect they are going for the Anakin salvation moment in this alternate reality. And do you guys think that at the end of this, when Ahsoka comes back to real life, when she comes back to the current timeline, she's going to be visited by Anakin's Force ghost? They're going to use Hayden Christensen, that is confirmed, but I hope they use him well. I want to see him as Anakin, also Darth Vader in flashbacks, and as a Force ghost as Anakin redeemed. And do you think we could have a three-way interaction action with Luke, Ahsoka, Luke and Anakin, that would be amazing, and who knows, maybe even Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan's Force Ghost. I don't know if they're going to do much with Alec Guinness in terms of deepfake and that kind of thing, so I can imagine them doing something with Ewan McGregor in that position. Really interesting food for thought, guys. I love these leaks, and I'm very excited to see what the Ahsoka series is going to bring. It does sound like it's going to do a lot in the way of fanfiction and what if, and you know, that's Dave Filoni's playbook. He loves to follow the legacy of George Lucas and give us some fantastic scenarios, so I'm excited for this, and as I say, excited to see how Mustafar looks in the volume. So share your thoughts in the comments down below, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you always.